Hey there, Louis Acapelles here. Thanks for stopping by. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can create a basic adaptive card and then create a flow in Power Automate that posts that adaptive card to a channel in a team in Microsoft Teams. Now, before we get started, if you find this tutorial helpful, please hit that thumbs up below and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to stay up to date on the latest tutorials that I publish. Now let's go ahead and let's get started. Now, what exactly is an adaptive card? Well, an adaptive card is a platform agnostic method for sharing and displaying blocks of information. Now, adaptive cards are typically authored in JSON, that is JavaScript Object Notation, which is a lightweight method for storing and transferring data between apps and services. Now, as you'll see in this tutorial, we are going to use a tool called Adaptive Card Designer that lets you build out adaptive cards from a drag and drop interface. And as you build your adaptive card, the designer is going to author the JSON syntax for you. And that syntax is what we will actually paste into the post an adaptive card action in Power Automate. Now, this specific tutorial is going to look at building a simple adaptive card that just contains static text and a clickable button that will program to open your browser and take us to a SharePoint Online list. Now, specifically, we're going to build an adaptive card that is reminding team members to go update a SharePoint Online list that was built to track which days they'll be working in the office. Now let's go ahead and let's get started. All right, now you can see here that I am in the Adaptive Card Designer. Now this is where you can come to design and build your adaptive cards. Now I've put the link to the Adaptive Card Designer in the description below. You can also just Google it and it is going to be the first search result if you type that in Google. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on New Card. And this is the menu that allows you to select how you want to build out your card. And you can see that you have options. You can scroll down and browse through sort of the gallery, which are sort of templated cards that you can start with and then modify to meet your specific requirements. Or you can build a card from a pre-existing JSON schema, or you can just start from scratch. Now, this tutorial is really sort of an introduction to working with adaptive cards. So we're going to go ahead and start from a blank card, and I'll go ahead and click on that here. Now you can see that I'm in the designer and I have a blank or empty adaptive card right here in the top pane. Now, very quickly, just a walkthrough of the interface. You'll notice that on the left, you have different card elements, and essentially what these are elements that you can just drag and drop into your adaptive card to build that out. And what you're going to notice throughout the tutorial is when I actually drag and drop these elements, you're going to notice that this card payload editor updates. And this is where you can kind of see the JSON schema for the card. Unfortunately, this designer is just going to build out that syntax based on what we drag and drop. Now, the element properties is where you can come to modify the specific properties of these different elements that we're going to be adding into our card. Now, what I'm going to do to start is I'm going to start by adding a text block to my card. So I'm going to just hover over text block and I'm going to click my mouse and drag that onto my card. Now, before I release it, I want you to just pay attention to that card payload editor. So you can see as I place this element on the card, the designer is just going to add this JSON to the payload editor for us. And you're also going to notice that the element properties is now displaying different properties of this particular card element. Now, you can see that this text block is just showing some static text that reads new text block. What we're going to do is we're going to modify that text. And to do that, I'm going to scroll over to the element properties field. And this text field is what you use to control what actually appears in this text block element. So I'm going to delete this and I'm going to put in a message that says update work from office days. And you can see as I enter this value here, it also populates in the adaptive card. Now, a very important note, if at any point when you're building out your cards, you want to preview what it's going to look like, what you can do is just scroll up to the top here and click preview mode. And that is just going to give you a clean view of your adaptive card. And if you want to exit that preview mode, you can just uncheck this and it's going to allow you to come back into the adaptive card and click on your different elements. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add another text block to my adaptive card. So I'm going to grab the text block element, and again, I'm going to drag it into the card. And if you want to rearrange elements on your card, you can see here that I can just move this up and down. And you'll also notice again that the JSON in the card payload editor is updating dynamically based on where I put this. Now I'm just going to drop it under my header here. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in a larger body of text. And so I will scroll over to the element properties pane, and I'm going to go ahead and paste some text into this. And so you can see I've just pasted in this message that says, please remember to enter the days that you will be working from the office next week in the office days track. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to modify the appearance of this text. So we're going to start with the update work from office days header. So this is a header, and right now this text kind of appears the same as my body. So to modify text, for example, I'm going to select the element. And if I scroll over to the element properties pane and I scroll down, you can see here that there is a layout group. And this is where you can come to actually amend the formatting, the appearance of different elements such as text. So you can see I can change spacing if I wanted to do that. And I'll just go ahead and change this to large. And you'll notice that there was no change given this was just sort of one line of text. So I'll put this back to default. You can change things like the height, you can have your text wrap, and if I keep scrolling down, I can change things like the font type, the size, the weight, etc. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit bolder. So I'm going to click into my weight property and I'm going to select bolder, and you can see here that the text is now bold. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on the size, and I'm going to set this to large. And you can see now that that text is increasing in size. If I wanted to change this color, I could again click into the color field and I could go ahead and select a different color here. So I'll just go ahead and set this to attention and I will move on. Now what I'll quickly do is I'm going to go ahead and select my text as well, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to click into the size field and I'm going to select medium, and you can see here that the size has increased as well. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a button to this form that my users could actually click when they get this message, and that's going to just be a link taking them into a SharePoint list. Now to do that, you're going to notice that there's this little tooltip here that says add an action. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and this is going to bring up a drop down. And essentially what this is these are sort of pre-built functions that allow you to do different things. So you'll see here the first one says action open URL. That's going to be the one that we use in our adaptive card. If perhaps you were building out an adaptive card to collect data from users, you might add this action submit so that the user could actually click on it and then submit that data, and presumably you would be doing something with it, maybe through a flow. Now I'm going to go ahead and click action.open URL, and you're going to see here that it's now added this button, and the button itself currently reads action.open URL. So we're going to need to actually modify that so that it looks a little bit nicer and maybe says, submit or click here, for example. Now I'm going to click on this button, and again, you can see here that in the element properties, it's now pointing to this action.open URL. Now you can see here you have a bunch of different options again. So if I wanted to put a tooltip, for example, that is a little message that would be displayed when a user hovers over it. I could enter that in here. You could change things like the style, the icon, add in a URL, etc. Now, we're going to be making this a button that's going to link out to a SharePoint list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and paste my URL in the URL field. So you can see I've just pasted that in, and I'm going to go ahead and now scroll up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the title here. So you can see this reads action.open URL. I'm going to go ahead and put the text that reads click here, and you can see here that that has now updated in my adaptive card. Now, for demonstration purposes, I'll just go ahead and add a tooltip. So you can see here, I've put in this text that reads, click here to open Office Days Tracker. And again, we're going to go ahead and preview this so that we can actually see what it looks like. Now you can see when I hover my cursor over this adaptive card, that tooltip shows up. And if I go ahead and I click on it, you can see that I'm getting this message that says action executed, open URL title, click here, and it's displaying the URL to my SharePoint list. All right, so we finished building our simple adaptive card. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to move into Microsoft Power Automate, and we are going to build out our flow that triggers on a schedule and that posts this adaptive card to a channel of a team in Microsoft Teams. All right, so I've moved into Power Automate, and I am going to go ahead and start by clicking on Create. And next, I'm going to go ahead and click on Scheduled Cloud Flow. This screen is prompting you to give your flow a name, so I'll just give mine a name. And the next thing that it's asking you to do is to set the trigger for this scheduled flow. And specifically, that is, when do you want this flow to start in terms of the date? So I'm just going to set this to Friday. And also you want to specify the time. So I'm going to click on this drop down and I'm going to schedule this flow to execute close to the end of the day at 4 p.m. And then you have to set the frequency in which this flow will execute. Now I want my flow to execute 1 time a week. So I'm going to leave the value 1 here. And in this drop down, I'm going to change this from minute to week. So this is saying that this flow will run starting on June 3rd at 4 p.m. and it will repeat 1 time per week. And you can specify the days on which you want this to execute. Now I'm just going to uncheck all of these options here, and I want my flow to execute again only on Fridays at 4 p.m. Next, I'm going to click on Create. All right, so we've now built our trigger. So again, this is a scheduled flow that's going to execute 1 time per week. And the next step is to add our first action here. Now to do that, you want to click on New Step. And in the Choose an Operation field, we are going to search for Post an Adaptive. And I can just start typing, and this is going to bring back some results here. So you can see the first option on the Actions pane is Post Adaptive Card in a chat or a channel. Now there's also one that reads Post Adaptive Card and wait for a response. We're not going to be using this because we're not actually waiting for any kind of response. We're not waiting for some sort of input, perhaps data entry or other. We just want to post a static message. There is a link, but we just want our users to be able to click that link and navigate out to a SharePoint list. So that's really the difference between these two. Wait for a response is perhaps you've built some fields where you're asking your users to input data. And if you've done that and you want to process that data, then you would be using this one that says wait for a response so you can collect that data. So again, I'm just going to select Post Adaptive Card in a chat or a channel. All right, and you can see that that adaptive card action has been added. Now, you're being asked for a few inputs here in this action. And the first one is, how do you want to post this message? And you can see by default, what it says is flow bot. And if I click on this drop down, you can see that I have some options. I can either post this message as a user. So that means that when this message actually gets posted in the channel, instead of saying, hey, this is being sent by Power Automate, you could have this set by yourself. And I'll just go ahead and click on user here. Now, if you wanted this to be posted by Microsoft Power Automate, then you could go ahead and click on the drop down here and select Flow Bot. Now, just for demonstration purposes, what that means is that when this flow gets executed, this is what you're going to see. The actual post will be sent from Power Automate. And you can see here that it says, from me via Power Automate. If we select user, it's just going to post that message as the user. You're not going to see that Power Automate card here. So just a minor detail, something for you to consider. Now, the next step is to select the channel or the group chat that you want to post this adaptive card in. Now you can see you do have that option. So you could either post this in a channel, you could post it in a chat and send it to specific users that perhaps you want to hard code in this flow, or a group chat. Now I'm just going to go ahead and select channel. And next what's going to happen is I'm going to be prompted to select the team and the channel. Now I'm going to click on my drop down here for team, and this is going to present a list of all the teams that I'm a member of. So I'm going to go ahead and select operations, and then I'm going to be prompted to select my channel, and I'm going to select the general channel for the purposes of this tutorial. So again, now we're saying we're going to post an adaptive card in a chat or a channel. As the flow bot, we've selected channel in the operations team, and specifically we want this message to be posted in the general channel. Now the next step is to actually paste in our adaptive card. Now I'm going to go ahead and click into this field, and what we're going to do is we're going to flip back to our adaptive card designer. What you want to do is you want to go ahead and click this button that says copy card payload. Essentially what that's going to do is copy the JSON from the card payload editor. And once you've copied this, you want to go back into Power Automate, and you just want to paste that JSON in the adaptive card field here. So that's it. We've gone ahead and we've built our flow. Now, again, in this example, we're not going to be adding any additional actions. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and save this flow, and you can see that it is saving. And if there were any errors or any issues with your flow, you would have received a notification when that save actually committed. And if you want to be sure there's no issues, you can always click on the flow checker. And so we can see here there's no errors or warnings. So I'm going to close out of this. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and test this so that we can verify that we've built the flow and that we've built the adaptive card correctly. All right, now in order to test this flow, I'm going to go ahead and click on the test button, and I'm going to test this manually. So I'm going to select that option and then run test. Next, I'm going to click on run flow. Now we can see that our flow has executed and that it is running here. And we can see here that this flow has now executed. So I'm going to bring up Microsoft Teams. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click into my team here, and I'm going to scroll down and click into the general channel. And so we can see that this adaptive card was posted, but there is this error message that says, we're sorry, this card couldn't be displayed. Now I'm intentionally showing this because I've seen this before, and I'm going to show you how to fix this. In order to fix this, what you want to do is you want to come back into your adaptive card designer, and you'll notice here at the top it says target version 1.5. So that means this is the most recent release of the adaptive card designer. I've just seen this behavior before, and in order to actually fix this, we're just going to click on the drop down and we're going to select either 1.4 or 1.3. It's just an older build of this solution. And we're going to go ahead and copy the card payload again. And what we're going to do is in Power Automate, we're going to click back into our flow, and we're going to click on edit. And we're just going to replace the JSON with the JSON that we just generated after switching to that 1.3 version. So I'm going to go ahead and click save, and I'm going to click test again, and I'm going to click on manually and test, and then run flow. I'll click on done. We can see here that the flow executed. And now when I bring back Microsoft Teams, what you're going to notice is that the flow executed and the adaptive card was posted. And again, I don't have an explanation as to why when you're using the most recent build of the adaptive card designer, do you get this error? I've seen this behavior when I've built a few different adaptive cards, and through my research, I found that just switching to an older framework in the adaptive card designer resolves that issue. So that's kind of why I've showed you this error message here. So you can see in our adaptive card, our header we built, update work from office days. We can see here our static text. Please remember to enter the days that you will be working from the office. And we can see here our button. Now I'll go ahead and click on this button. And you can see that the URL works. It takes us right into our SharePoint list. And so that's it. In this tutorial, we looked at how to create a basic adaptive card and then how to create a flow to actually post that adaptive card to a channel in a team in Microsoft Teams. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, please hit that thumbs up below. And if you want to help me out, please share this tutorial with your colleagues, share it with your friends or anybody else who might find this useful. And if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on the latest content that I'm publishing. I'm Louis Yacobelis. Thanks for stopping by. Talk soon.